Hi all, Srikanth here. In this video, we will discuss the basics of single sign-on and how does it work and the benefits of using a single sign-on. So there was a time when the user has to create user accounts for every application and remember every login credential. So the user has to log in each of the services with an individual username password. So the user has to manually enter username passwords to access a specific application. That's why the idea of SSO or single sign-on became more popular in enterprise. So the user simply has to log in once and then he can access all the external services. So this is basically achieved by using Saml, nothing but the security assertion markup language. So basically, this is an open standard for exchanging authentication and authorization data between the two parties, also called the identity provider and the service provider. So SAML is mainly used to enable single sign-on, which allows user to access multiple applications with a single set of login credentials. So this single sign-on allows the user to sign in with one set of credential and gain access to the multiple applications and services. So the SSO improves safety and offers clients with a better user experience by decreasing the number of necessary accounts or passwords that the user has to remember. So, for example, when you log into Gmail, you're automatically granted access to your accounts in Google and applications like Google Drive, YouTube, and Maps. So let's try to understand how the single sign-on can be achieved with the SAML protocol. So this is basically the SAML flow. So let's break down the key components of our SAML. So basically, we have the identity provider and the service provider. So the identity provider is where you identify and your identity is established and authenticated. And this actually stores and manages the digital identities. And the service provider is the one where the applications or services you want to access, they rely on basically the identity provider to give them the user authentication. So basically, the finally a SAML assertion is an XML document that is exchanged between an identity provider and a service provider to convey information about the user identity. So the SAML assertions are used to implement single sign-on on which this allows user to access multiple applications with a single set of login credentials. So SAML assertions contain a variety of information such as user identity, such as names, email addresses, and also the user authorization level, such as roles or permissions. So this is how basically the SAML works. User tries to attempt access to a SAML enabled service provider. The service provider redirects the user to identity provider. Okay, this the user gets authenticated with the identity provider. The identity provider redirects the user back to service provider with a sample assertion which contains your identity information. So the service provider then validates the sample assertion and then grants the access to the user. So this is how the flow looks with the SAML enabled SSO. So let's try to understand with a demo application. So this basically user is trying to access a service provider. You can see that the service provider URL here. Service provider doesn't know anything about the user information. That is why the service provider will redirect to the identity provider to identify the user. So let's continue with the flow. So there is a user called Jackson. Now you can see the redirection happened to the mocksaml.com. So this is basically the identity provider where it knows the user information of Jackson. Now let's try to inspect and see the flow, how that is happening. Now when I click on sign in, the identity provider authenticates the user and generates the SAML assertion. So basically, this is the SAML information that is generated for the user, and this is sent from IDP to SP. Now let's try to decode this. I'm going to SAML tool.io, and I'm trying to decode the assertion that got generated. And if you see, so this is basically the assertion, and this assertion is signed by using the IDP's private key, and the service provider verified that signed information with the IDP's public key. So basically, again, the concept of digital signature comes into picture. And if you try to understand the assertion that was sent, so this is issued by the samlexample.com. So this is basically the IDP, and the destination was for the SP called sso.eu.boxhq.com. And this is signed Saml response and assertion. You can see that the signature is verified. Uh, and you can also see the assertion information like name ID, and also the information like email, first name, last name are also sent as part of the assertions. So basically, SAML is used to enable single sign-on, on which it allows the user to access multiple applications with a single set of login credentials. Now, in our case, the SAML demo boxhq.com doesn't know who this Jackson user is, but it got authenticated from the IDP, where mock SAML was acting as an IDP, and this IDP generated the SAML assertion, and it redirected the session to the service provider, and service provider consumed the generated assertion, and it gave access to the user. So this is how the single sign-on works. Thank you.